Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Anna. I'm a business development manager here at AWS, and I'm here today joined by Chris Dixon, who's head of IT, partnering and innovation at Lancaster University. Please be aware that we will be recording this webinar, and the recording will be made available to you after the session. We will also be conducting a live Q&A at the end. So if there's any questions you would like to ask myself or Chris, just feel free to keep sending those to us, and we will be monitoring those questions and answering as many as we can at the end. Please also be aware that we will be sharing a short survey with you that we will be very thankful if you can fill and send back to us, as that helps us improving future sessions. Okay, so back to Alexa in education. Not long ago, Gartner said that conversational platforms are changing the way in which we interact with the digital world. And what they mean by this is that we are now interacting with our technology, our personal technology, in a much more natural way than we used to. We are talking with our technology in the same way, or almost in the same way, as we interact with humans. And this is by talking, by using words, as we would with our friends and our work colleagues. We've been seeing technology evolving rapidly over the past decades, and particularly the way in which we interact with this technology. Most people at this webinar will probably have a smartphone in their pockets, will be using a personal computer, for example, and these devices will be connected to the internet. And the way in which we interact with these devices is way more natural than we used to be. So if we go back into the 70s, for example, you would literally need a computer degree to be able to interact with a computer. Now we don't need that anymore. We have keyboards, we have mouses, which allow us to type in words that computers can understand. The same words, again, we would use to talk with our friends. With our mobile phones, we can chat with each other using mobile applications that we don't necessarily understand how they work, but they understand us and they know what we want to do when we talk back to them. And we are now seeing even more transforming shift for using voice technology, where we are simply talking to our personal devices. So today, I would like to talk to you a little bit more about Alexa. Alexa is a voice service. Alexa launched 5 years ago. And over the past 5 years, it evolved quite rapidly as well. When it launched, it could only do about 13 things. We call these things Alexa skills. So these are the capabilities of Alexa. And when it launched, it could do things such as tell you the news, for example, play some music, or even telling you the weather. And again, it would understand you in the same way as you would be talking to another human being. So if I was asking Alexa, what's the weather like today in London, or how is it like today in London, for example, Alexa would still understand that I was talking about the weather. And again, I wouldn't need to know what specific commands or tabs or clicks would I have to make in order to get this information back from Alexa. I would just simply ask as I would if I was talking to a person, a real person. One of the things that make Alexa very special was the fact that it was made available open source from day one. So by open source, I mean that anyone, and literally anyone, can build into Alexa experiences. Even people without coding experience can build experiences that can be made available through the Alexa voice service. And this means that we are now seeing businesses such as Uber, for example, or even other companies such as Spotify, for example, making their contents available through Alexa that we can interact with just simply using our voice, and a conversational language that we would be using as if we were talking to our friends. Something that has also changed quite a lot over the past 5 years about Alexa is the fact that when it launched, we very often recognized Alexa by being available on something that we called the Echo speaker. And that's the smart speaker that you see in the center of this image. We still very often associate Alexa with these speakers, but the reality is Alexa is a voice service that is now available, as we say, everywhere. And this means that Alexa is an actual mobile app that you can download in your phone. This is a free app, by the way, so I strongly recommend you try it out if you haven't done so yet. It's a mobile app you can download in your phone, for example, or if you have a compatible personal computer, you can also download it to your computer. For example, if you have Windows 10, you can download the Alexa app for your computer. Or you can also access the Alexa service through a wide range of enabled devices from companies such as Sony. For example, if you have a smart TV from Sony, very likely you'll have Alexa available there. Or if you're lucky enough to have a compatible car, you might also be able to access Alexa through your car manufacturer as well, or even through a wide range of smart speakers from brands such as Sonos and again Sony, etc., etc. This is making the service more and more easier to use, and we are seeing a huge interaction from users wanting more and more and more. And this is prompting businesses to start thinking differently about the way in which they interact with their consumers. And for our audience today, that means the way in which we interact with our students. So again, Alexa skills are these capabilities of Alexa. We now have more than 100,000 skills available globally. And again, this will be businesses such as, you know, if you're in UK, BBC News, for example, or again, Spotify, Uber, all these different services now interacting with their users through a voice experience, through Alexa. Putting it very, very, very simply, the way Alexa works is a user talks, asks a question. So if this is about a student, they could be asking, Alexa, what's my timetable, for example? Alexa will take that question, will send it back to the backend system, which we will refer to as the cloud. That backend system for your university could be, for example, your learning management system, let's say Blackboard or Moodle, for the sake of this example. It will then look for the information and send it back to the user, again, using voice technology. So it would literally read it out loud back to the student, which would enable the student to access this information very quickly, very easily, and again, without having to have any pre-knowledge on how Alexa would work or source for this information. They would simply ask, Alexa, what's my timetable? We are seeing a lot of institutions now getting interested in using this smooth technology to interact with their students. There's a few reasons for that. I think one of the first ones is Alexa is accessible. Alexa speaks more than 9 languages today in different dialects as well. And this makes it more widely available to anyone at the university. So again, a really good way to address things such as accessibility, for example. It's also a really good way to make things a little bit more efficient and more productive. So again, think in use cases as in, for example, booking a room or an appointment with someone at the university. You don't need to know who that person is or their contact details. You just use your voice and you simply ask, Alexa, book me an appointment with my tutor, as an example. And again, Alexa will sort all of that on your behalf. We are also seeing a strong interest around making your institutions a little bit more connected. So concepts like smart campus, for example, are really, really easy to connect using voice technology. Simple things such as, again, booking rooms across the campus are some of the use cases we are seeing, but also sometimes simple things such as seeing something broken when you walk across the institution. You don't know who reported to you, but if there was a service available through Alexa, let's say, and you can just simply say, hey, Alexa, there's something broken here. Can you please tell someone to come and fix it? And that can simply just happen. We're also seeing a huge focus on students. Any project we are seeing from universities now and colleges when looking into enabling Alexa to their students very often starts with a request and an aim to make the student experience better at the university or at the college. We see universities and colleges wanting to get their students involved into these kind of projects, and not just as participants and not just as end users, but also as people that will be able to build the project and to provide feedback and make it better and more engaging for them as well. But enough of me. I really want you today to hear from the experts and from firsthand from one of the universities in UK that was one of the pioneers, I would say, launching voice services and Alexa for their students. So I'm here today joined by Chris Dixon. And now, Chris, over to you.
Anna, thank you so much. So I am Chris Dixon from Lancaster University. I am the customer, and it's great to hear Anna talking about the ways in which Alexa is being used really effectively in education. I guess as the customer, how do we know that all of that is true? And what I hope to do today is show you our Alexa skill, which I think is quite advanced. It's called LU, LU being the slang name that students use for Lancaster University. So really wanted to give you a flavour of why we chose to develop it, how we actually went about building it, build on some of the stuff that Anna's said in terms of how you can deploy it in many different places. It's much more than just a speaker type device. And also hopefully inspire you to be able to build out skills like this yourself. So that's where I hope we will go, and there's going to be some time for Q&A at the end, and hopefully I'll be able to answer your questions as well. Just a little bit to start with about Lancaster University. So we're top 10 university in the UK, up in the Northwest. That's where I am today. 17,000 students, about 3,000 staff, and also we're an international university. So some of the things around the way that we can engage with our international communities can be enabled by technologies such as Alexa. So we've got campuses in Ghana, China, Malaysia, and we've just recently opened a campus over in Germany. I think the expression that gets used about Lancaster is we punch well above our weight for our size of university. And actually part of what we do, I work in the IT area, is trying to be kind of digitally innovative and trying to work with some of these new technologies. And that's why we're kind of leading the way in this voice field. So why would you go about building a voice skill? Well, for me, from my perspective, this is the key thing. It's easier to talk, right? You can talk at 150 words a minute, you can type at 40. And in the past, when you talk to your computer, the recognition wasn't hugely great and people kind of ran into issues. That's no longer the case. The cloud technology that we have with AWS means that it can understand you, it can understand your dialect. It's actually quite rich in the way that works, and so now we can start to build skills that are really useful, and hopefully I'll get a chance to live demo some of those things to you so that you can see it's much more than PowerPoint slides. It actually does work and people are using it. Building on that, the background is that actually students and people, and I guess yourselves who are listening to this, are starting to use voice technology, and it's becoming a big part of what we do. So Anna had some Gartner statistics in there. I've got one as well. 30% of all search is done without a screen by 2020, and it's not escaped me that it is 2020. So we're starting to see a lot more search activity, a lot more people coming through their phone or their voice device and actually using the power of their voice, moving away from typing. This is interesting, I think, especially for education. A large number of people say that actually when they talk to their smart speaker, it feels like talking to a friend and it feels like talking to another person. And as we think through issues of student well-being and student retention and how students engage with our services, that's really kind of super important. And we wanted to build on that concept and say, well, actually, is it possible to build a student's digital friend that they can feel comfortable and confident with talking to another person? 55% of teenagers use voice technology, voice search on a daily basis, and actually that's the people that we're building our skills for. So at university, we know that people coming in from GCSE and A-level and kids coming through the system and coming to university expect this to be a thing that they're actually going to have to be using and dealing with, and that's really, really important for us as well. So I'll just explain the image on the right hand side of the screen there. This is my 4-year-old niece at the time, and she was so comfortable with using the Alexa voice technology that without her parents knowing, she'd added some quite interesting items to the shopping list. And I mean, it's a silly example in some ways, but it really brought home to me that actually children, teenagers, people coming to universities, they are comfortable with using voice technology. And in fact, more than that, they're expectant that we're going to have services, and that for me was one of the compelling reasons. As I said, it should be, if we get it right, faster and easier, and actually there's some efficiency savings there. You can save actual money by having people using voice rather than going through a more traditional web interface. If you start using the Alexa devices yourself and you start using the Alexa app, you will see there's loads of really compelling examples from other companies, public sector, private sector, where they've really built these innovative and really easy to use voice skills. I think the other thing that we need to think about is for universities, it can enable us to build a foundation to then be able to use other cloud service benefits. So when we built out the voice skill, we were able to give our developers the experience of working with the AWS cloud platform, and we're now starting to use that for many other interesting and worthwhile things. So that was kind of the why we did it. How did we do it? Well, we broke from the norm, really. So I run an innovation team here at Lancaster. It's our job to look at innovative new technologies, and voice was one of the things that we were starting to look at. We borrowed from the way that Amazon do things, and we did something called starting with the press release. So rather than writing a traditional university business case, which can be quite long and boring and protracted, I'm sure that's not the case at your institution. We wrote the press release and we said Lancaster University is going to become one of the first UK universities to power all of its services with voice. Students are going to be using it. It's going to be able to answer any question that they want. It's going to be kind of really successful. We wrote that case, and actually we had a press article when we released first released our skill back in March 2019, and I did a comparison between this press article, which was carried nationally in the Times, and what we wrote in our original business case, and it was quite startling what we've been able to achieve in a relatively short space of time. So one takeaway I'd give for you is actually, don't be afraid of dreaming big. Don't be afraid of starting to write that press release and think about how you can use this this technology for yourself. So how did we do it? It took 120 days in total to deliver our skill, and I'm just going to go through how we did it, and this is hopefully give you some examples of how you can do it as well. So we're back in kind of March 2018 now. Early on in our voice journey, we'd actually built some early prototypes, and one of the things that Anna will be sharing is how easy it is, and it's even easier now, to start very simply and quickly come up with a prototype. Our prototype just did one simple thing. You could say, when is the next bus into town? And it would tell you when the next bus was, and that was it. But even that generated some excitement at the university, and we then wrote that press release and said, look, this could be something that's really innovative, really great press for the university, and it's something that could really help the students. And we said to the university, we need some investment. Give us some investment to allow our developers to develop this technology. Now, it may not surprise you to learn that actually the hardest and longest job in this process was actually getting the money. But in November 18, we actually started. What do you do first? The first thing we did is we sent a survey to 3,000 students via our current mobile phone app, and we just asked them one question, one simple question. What would you like to ask a chatbot? Now, if you imagine to yourselves the kind of things that came back, there were some sensible things. When's my next lecture? How can I get in touch with my tutor? What's my grade? All that kind of stuff. And there was some things around campus life. When are the bars? When are the shops open? And that kind of information. So we clumped that together, and we, using an agile software development process, we started to go about building out the skill. So we had 2-week sprints with our development team. First thing we did, build the infrastructure. Actually super easy to build because you're building it in the AWS cloud. We built our security infrastructure, so personalization of the skill, super important, having the students sign in and authenticate. We then started to connect up to our local APIs, which is how we get information from our on-site services into the skill. So then we started to build out features and functions. So we started with some of the academic things, what's on my timetable, what's coming up next, and dealing with all the different ways that students can potentially ask that question. One thing we really wanted to do is make the skill fun. We had this idea of a digital friend, so we started to build in fun greetings and think about the language that the skill would talk to the student in to make it really kind of engaging for them. One of the things that we did, and I'd recommend this as a technique, is try and stay away from the simple kind of question and answer responses that you then have to maintain and actually link to university services. And I'll explain a little bit about how we did that in a moment. But there were some genuine question and answers responses, and so we built those in. We link through to our university events system so that students could get information about what's on. We also built some specific skills for people who might have a disability, because we felt that that was one of our key user groups. Next, we just continued that process of hooking up to more and more services. We built in information about exams. We built in something that allows you to research almost any subject, and hopefully I'll give you a flavour of that in the demo in a moment. Even though we focused on students, there's a whole bunch of information you can get for staff as well. And so we were able to include staff data. So a lecturer, for example, might want to know information about their students. And with very little extra work, you can get quite a lot more utility. There's loads of things on campus that you can link up to, things like computer availability, even the availability of washing machines. And we then started to integrate it into our mobile phone app. So more than just a skill on the Alexa app and on a device, we wanted to present it in our campus app because we knew that that's where all of our users were engaging with. We'd set ourselves a tight deadline at the end of the 120 days. So we finished off by exploring some of the video devices. So being able to present cards with richer information to the users if they had a screen in front of them. Obviously testing, deployment, and there we go. After 120 days, we hit our target and we'd released Ask LU, our skill, LU. What was the size of the team that delivered it? We had 3 full-time developers on the team. We recruited a conversational specialist, and that's something that you might like to think about, because when you're designing and developing for voice, it's a different mindset to how developers have previously worked. You can ask the same question in multiple different ways, and you need to kind of think through that and make that a really great experience. But one of the things that's key to us is employing students. So for the project, we had 8 part-time students, but we employ a lot more than that inside our team. And I'll come on to talk about exactly how we use them, but they really are true partners in this. They're producing code, they're writing marketing materials and documentation. They are very much a key part of the team. So I'll just say a little bit more about student interaction, because that's really key. We have a model which you can see on screen there of how we engage with them. So we had beta users who had test devices out in their student rooms, and they gave us feedback every 2 weeks. We gave them a new version of the skill. We fixed bugs. We were able to change the design to make it match what the students were looking for. We collected issues when students had them when they rang up the service desk. We participated with them in designs. We presented ideas. We refined them. They were very much involved. The other thing we did and continue to do is have focus groups of students. So for example, we'd give them a device that they'd never seen before and say, you know, use the skill, ask it anything you like, and we'd use that information to refine what went in the skill. I mentioned the survey. That's another way of gathering information from students, just asking them simply, what is it that you would ask a chatbot? And also participating with students where they are. So we monitor Snapchat, Facebook, Twitter, where the students are actually talking. And believe me, if they've got an issue or a comment, you'll track it there. So that to us is super important, involving the students at every stage. Okay, well, here we go. To prove that it actually exists, I'm going to try some examples on the device. And this is just a flavor of what LU can do. So just bear with me a second while I call her up. Open LU.
Welcome back to LU. Have you tried What's New? It can keep you up to date with what's happening on campus, your deadlines and news. What can I help you with?
What's my student ID?
Your student ID is What else can I help you with?
What week is it?
We're in week number 20. What else can I help you with?
What is my next event?
You do not have any events in the next 5 days. What can I help you with next?
What time is Greg's open on Friday?
Greg's is open on Friday between 7 a.m. and 5 p.m. What else can I help you with?
Is it going to rain?
The forecast is for few clouds. The temperature is 12 Celsius. What can I help you with next?
What is the phone number for Chris Dixon?
You can call Chris Dixon from Information Systems Services on +44 1524 510167. What can I help you with next?
How many computers are free in the library?
There are 102 pieces free at the moment. What else can I help you with?
Research the radius of the moon.
The average radius of the moon is 1,737.4 kilometers. How else can I help you?
Can you book me a group workroom?
Okay, what day are you looking for?
Friday,
What time is that for?
2 p.m.
And for how many people?
3 people,
How many hours is that for?
2 hours.
Great, so it's a work room for 3 people at 2 p.m. on Friday the 20th of March for 2 hours. Shall I book that?
No, thank you.
Okay. What else can I help you with?
That's everything for now. Thank you. Bye-bye. Okay, so hopefully that gave you a good idea of the range of things that LU can do. So just to reiterate where it actually is, it works inside the iLancaster mobile app, which is our campus mobile app. Majority of our students use it. It also works on the Alexa smart speaker family, including richer information when we have a screen available on a device that does video. We also have it in the Alexa app itself. That's the app I was using for the demo. We've also embedded it into Microsoft Teams, which is a collaboration platform that we use at the university and that students use. We've embedded it into our main student web portal. And we've actually done some work to look at other use cases. So there is an Amazon AWS technology called Sumerian, which allows a VR character to actually talk and interact with. And we've done some work in playing around with that technology as well. So just to cover off some of the things it can do, it's really useful for new students. So basic information, what college am I in, what's my email address, what's my student ID. One of the things we found was that students are embarrassed to come and ask those questions. And we think that our services are really open to students, that they're happy to come and talk to us, but sometimes they're embarrassed to ask those questions. And they find it quite powerful to actually ask a voice device. Includes information about their course structure, and information that's pulled from our VLE as well. Now, existing students tend to be more comfortable with some of the basic questions, but they've got richer questions to ask. So that's where we hook up to our services. So we can ask information about their grades, how they're doing. They can ask about how busy campus services and facilities are. And as I showed in the demo, you can also do richer interactions, so booking things. And previously that would take maybe a couple of minutes on the web. It now takes just seconds when they talk using the voice interface. One of the powerful things about this project was we knew that by asking a whole sample of students, there might be some groups that weren't as well represented, and we wanted to build something for disabled students. So we built in specific information. We worked with disabled students. In fact, one of the most powerful things was working with a student who was blind, and she talked about the transformation when she could actually have the voice authoritatively reading out to her what was on her timetable. Sure, she could have used a screen reader, but actually hearing Alexa's voice speaking that out was something that was really powerful for her. So hopefully I've given you a flavour of what it can do. How did we actually go about building it? This builds on Anna's slide and hopefully just gives you a reasonably high level how it works. So there's a couple of ways you can use the skill. In fact, there's loads of ways, but you're really coming in through one of our apps. So we call it our iLancaster mobile app. Technology called Amazon Lex processes what you speak or type. You can also come in from an Alexa enabled device, and a technology called the Alexa Skills Kit also does the same thing. It turns your voice into text. What they all try and do is work out the intent of what you're saying. So I could be saying, what's my next session? What have I got on next? What's next on my timetable? The intent of all of those questions is to ask something about my timetable. With intent, you also get slots, and that's the information you need to gather in order to fulfill that request. So in the demo, I was asking about booking a room. To book a room properly, I need to know things like what day it is, how long I want to book for, how many people it's for, and they're called the slots. Both of those things go to some serverless code, so there's no servers to maintain here. They're called Lambda functions, and they run inside the AWS cloud. So once all that information is gathered and I've understood what the intent is, we then go through the Amazon API gateway, and that's the link between the Amazon cloud and our on-site services. And here's our local services. So we connected it up to our student system, to our VLE, which is Moodle, to data sources that give us the free PCs or the free laundry information. And we're also able to be quite clever with the way that we do that. And we use something called Elasticsearch to allow us to do that. So the local API is able to fulfill the query, and information flows back up through the Lambda function and back out to the Alexa enabled device, or to the mobile phone device, or to whatever the endpoint is that you're using. And that works really well, and hopefully in the demo you were able to see that. There's lots of other tools inside AWS to help you troubleshoot this. It's not hugely difficult. Our developers started with zero knowledge of the AWS stack and move really quickly to get up to speed. So you're able to use things like CloudWatch, things like X-Ray to work out exactly how the skill is performing and to deal with any issues. A question from university is always around how to authenticate it. Again, there's different ways you can come in, and that you might think that creates an issue, but we can manage that. So you could be coming in from a Alexa device, and it might be the first time that we've seen you through a device. What we do there is we talk to Amazon Cognito, which is the system excuse me, that stores the security information on the Amazon side. If we've not seen the user before, we call out to our on-site single sign-on provider, our SAML provider, create a token, pass that back, and create you an identity. If we're coming in from our current mobile phone app, when we hit the serverless code and we need to do authentication, we already have the user's information. So we look that up and we provision that into Amazon Cognito. And once you have an identity inside Cognito, everything works seamlessly. So from the user's perspective, it doesn't matter if they're using your current app or a website or the Alexa app, it's the same experience. Just a little bit about how we sold it to students. So actually getting students to use this is really, really important. And we use a kind of, multi-method approach for this. We had e-screens, digital screens around campus with advertising on, showing them what they can do. We had pull-up banners in our learning zone, in our student commons, in the library. We even used the computer screensavers on the desktop PCs that the students were using, just to kind of really get that message out and encourage and increase usage. Another great thing is actually highlighting student stories. So there are students, I mentioned the disabled girl that we worked with. Students have got really good experiences on this and actually sharing their stories through blogs and website articles. Excuse me, I'll grab a little bit of my tea. It was really, really important to us. So that's just a couple of the ways that we shared with students. Okay, finally, I'm just going to finish by talking about the future plans. So we launched it back in March 19, the original version. Since then, we've built in loads more features that students really, really like. So the ability to listen to lecturer feedback, either recorded from the lecturer themselves or spoken in Alexa's voice. We've got lecture playback and search integration with our on-site Panopto system. So you can ask Alexa and say, play me my last lecture. You can even say, Alexa, play me the part in my lecture where the lecturer talked about quantum physics, and it will search through the transcripts. If you're on an audio device, it will play the recording. If you're on a video device, you'll get the video as well. As I mentioned, loads more integration. Microsoft Teams, important to us. We also now have a telephone number. So actually, even if the student doesn't have a data connection, they can ring up a phone number and they can talk to the skill in that way as well. So it's, if you can dream it, it can be put there. Where do we see it going in the future? Well, some of the machine learning tools in AWS are really powerful. You know, can we use those tools to make interventions to the student to say, actually, you know, in order to do better, you might like to look at this article, read this book, connect with this tutor. That's really interesting. Can we move further on the concept of a digital friend? You know, perhaps a student's feeling sad, perhaps they're having difficulty planning their work. Could we actually have a really meaningful two-way conversation with Alexa and help them? I think we can, and we're starting to look at that. Of course, when we delivered this for students, the staff are crying out. So when we demonstrated the students being able to book rooms, the staff were like, hey, what about booking my rooms? That's a real pain, right? Can you build that? So we're looking at building in more and more digital services, and also looking to deploy devices. So wouldn't it be great to have a voice device inside maybe a lecture room or in the library as you come into the library and actually talk to people that way? So these are some of the things that we're thinking through. But what I really want to get across to you is that sense of the journey. So even more than when we started, it's easy to start to build a simple skill to kind of sell that to the university and say, this is something that we can build upon. And when it comes to building upon it, you know, the sky's the limit. And I really hope to be able to kind of inspire you to be able to start to take that journey. There's loads of great help available from AWS. Which you can use, and actually, you know, who knows, someone listening here can take this in an exciting new direction. I hopefully look forward to answering some of your questions at the end, but with that, I shall pass back to the wonderful Anna, who I think is just going to round things off for us.
Indeed. Thank you, Chris. That was super useful. Hopefully the audience found it quite useful as well. So as we go through the example from Lancaster University, most of you are probably now asking, okay, that's all very good, but how do I get started myself at my institution? Starting an Alexa journey is can be simple and quick as well. So in the case of Lancaster University, they decided to take the project and develop it themselves using the student community, which I find particularly awesome and interesting in regards to their particular experience. But for you, what does that mean? I think one of the first questions I always like to ask when I go and talk to you guys directly about your Alexa journey is, how would you use Alexa for your university? Would you focus the project on the student experience, pretty much as Lancaster has done, or would you rather focus using Alexa to improve the staff experience, for example, which can also be done, of course, and it's all up to you. I would like to share with you some just key takeaway slides in terms of some of the most common reasons and ways in which other institutions from across the globe are now using Alexa in their universities, in their colleges. Again, what is that you are trying to achieve? That should be the question number one. It's going to be different for every single institution. Every single institution is trying to achieve different things, but there's some commonalities between some of the things we are seeing from the institutions. So some of the business drivers, common business drivers we are seeing from institutions when starting their Alexa projects are, for example, increasing student engagement. We are seeing institutions now looking into Alexa as a way, as a tool to better communicate with their students. You know, with Alexa, they can now start building a persona. They can now start talking to their students as if they were, one of them, for example, or as if they were a friend. We're also seeing institutions focusing on increasing student retention and using Alexa as one of the tools to achieve that. So again, think about an Alexa skill that can actually nudge your students. An example, Paul, you have a new homework assignment. Wouldn't it be awesome if you could be sending this type of nudges to your students, for example, and using that as a tool to address student retention? Another common area that we see as a business driver for institutions to start playing around with Alexa is creating efficiencies within their universities towards smart campus. We call it smart campus, connected campus. So again, if there's something broken around the university, who do you call? Who do you speak with? Could we use Alexa as one single point of contact to address that issue? Or simple things such as both students and staff being able to simply ask Alexa to book a room for their work group, for example, or booking an appointment, or creating efficiencies in the library, for example. So again, all things that are possible today and that can be addressed via Alexa. In terms of the student experience specifically, such as Lancaster University, we are also seeing other institutions now asking AWS and Alexa for help to getting their student community involved. One of the programs we have that you might be already aware of, which is a digital skills program, free and available to any student with a university email address, is AWS Educate. Through this platform and through this program, which is available online, again, no costs associated, students can access exclusive training to help them get started in their Alexa journey. From here, taking Chris' words, sky's the limit. Think about how fun it would be to get your students excited about this project and getting them on a 3-day hackathon to help you build those use cases, to help you think about how Alexa could actually transform the student experience or staff experience for your institution. Something else that we see in terms of commonalities when looking into how Alexa skills are being used in institutions is the way in which these skills are allowing students to have more personalized and relevant experiences when interacting with the university. So the example that you just saw from Lancaster University, Chris explained to you how students are authenticating when they first use the skill, meaning that most of the questions that they ask Alexa through that skill experience are personalized to them, are tailored to them. When they ask about their timetables, they receive answers that are relevant to them and not just for anyone else at the university. Again, think about what you could achieve if you were sending those nudges to your students when they have new notifications from their teachers about new homework assignments, for example, how relevant those communications are when compared to generic emails that perhaps are not so relevant to the entire student community. And a third commonality that we are seeing on Alexa projects for the education institutions, such as universities or colleges, are to making it the core point of contact for your institution. So again, such as Chris was explaining when he was integrating with the learning management system, and now looking into things, looking into the future, looking into things such as making lectures available from there, but also other things such as, booking rooms across the campus and all of those different things. These span across many different areas from the university. So when you start your project, very likely you won't have the answer for all of these type of services through your Alexa skill. But what you can do from day one is to make sure that at least you're helping students being pointed to the right direction. So if I'm a new student at the university, for example, and I want to talk to someone about my finances, for example, I might not be able to address that topic specifically with exclusively through Alexa, but at least I should be able to get a point of next steps from Alexa. So for example, call this mobile phone number, for example, or maybe just go to this office desk from 9 to 5, or maybe just ping an email to this email address. And that really changes my experience as a student because it's really pointing me to the next steps. And that on its own is enough, to help my experience at the university. My key takeaway from today is get started. You joined this webinar as a first step, which demonstrates that you have an interest in this topic. One of the key things that I wanted to reiterate is Alexa is available to anyone, and anyone without even having any coding skills can actually get started with Alexa today. The first thing to do is download the Alexa app. Again, it's free and available. You can download it to your smart mobile phone and try something that is called routines or Alexa blueprints. Again, something fun that can help you building a quiz, for example, just to get you used to the technology. If you're looking into going down a pathway similar to Lancaster University, where you build a similar project from the university using students or maybe simply the IT staff, then I highly recommend you look into some of the online training available. Some of these trainings are really, really, really short, starting with as simple as 2-hour content, for example, that can help you get started. And the same thing with your students. Don't just simply send them the AWS badge link, for example. Get them involved, host a hackathon, and get them excited about this journey. Take them with you on this journey. The third key takeaway that I wanted to point out to you is if you are in a position where you want to move really, really fast, and perhaps you already know what your business case is going to be and what are the things that you're going to focus on, what I would suggest is maybe look into some of the AWS partners that can help you build this project and develop this project. And again, I'll be sending some suggested partners after the session today that you can look at for you to choose from. Okay, and we now get to the live Q&A bit. Hopefully you find this session interesting enough already so far. Please keep sending your questions. I have a few already, which I will address accordingly, but please feel free to keep sending your questions. The ones we can't address live, we will be contacting you via email shortly after the webinar. So please do not stop sending your questions. Chris, are you still there?
Of course.
Yay. All right, awesome, Chris. So I think a really good way to get us started with the live Q&A is, we have a lot of people today with us on this call, and some of the reasons that got them to join the webinar is because they most likely want to replicate what you've done, or at least take some key learnings from what you've done. So my first question to you is really, what tips do you have for people that are at stage -1 at this moment?
So I'd really echo some of the things that you said. I think there's more resources out there in AWS land than even there was when we started. So I think the number one thing will be build a simple skill. It doesn't matter how simple it is. It could be a simple Q&A question pair, but just building that gives you the confidence to then go on and develop it. I think the other thing I would say is to kind of dream big, and the technology is there. If you have the data and you have a way of allowing that data to be made available, there is really no limit to what the skill can do. So I think it's a combination of those things. It's building something simple to get you comfortable with the technology and maybe to demonstrate to other people to get them excited about it, but also thinking for your individual use case, what's going to be the most powerful thing.
All right, that's some really, really, really good advice. Chris, just going through some of the questions from the audience. There's a lot of questions about how you guys went about integrating your university services with the skill. I know obviously you walked us through the slide where you talked about how you actually build it from an architecture point of view, but perhaps a good thing would be to actually highlight the top services that you've integrated with the skill. So I know one of them was Moodle, for example, where you're getting information for the timetabling, for example. Are there any other relevant university services that you've used to build this AskLU?
Yeah, I'll reel some off. Yeah, student system is key. So for us, that contains grades, marks, information on courses, information on exams. So that's a key early one. We've integrated our staff directory, which is the source of phone numbers, email addresses, and organizational sort of hierarchy information. There's loads of campus services that students are keen on. Opening times, we actually built a new service for that, just so that we didn't have to keep that information up to date in multiple places. Computer availability, laundry availability, Moodle you've mentioned, so that's really great for lecturer feedback. Panopto for our lecture capture system. I think the key message here is if you've got systems with data in and they have APIs, then you can go about integrating them. I will say there is another approach. Sometimes for universities, having access to those APIs can be tricky. Another approach is to take a whole bunch of data from those databases and to put them in the magical AWS cloud in something that we like to call a data lake and use that to write your APIs. And that's another potential approach that I've seen universities using quite successfully.
All right, awesome. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and hopefully people found it very useful. I think one topic that just talking about data, and I know you've talked about authentication quite a little bit during your presentation. One topic that people ask me about often and often again is around GDPR and authentication, and how does it work, and how did you make it work? So, Chris, from your experience, were there any specific processes and legislation that you followed when building the skill? How did you go about that?
Yeah, I wondered if you might be asking that, Anna. I did. There's a couple of different ways to approach this topic. I think one of them is getting the institution, so the university, comfortable with using cloud technology. That's not a challenge for some people because they're already there. It was a challenge for us. So there's actually some process, as you might imagine from a university, to go through just to be comfortable with the technology and kind of where the data is flowing. So from the university side. I think the other side is from the student side. The approach we took is when you first enable the skill, however you do that, it emails you some information about how your data is going to be used and how you can choose to opt out if you wish. So that's quite important. The other thing we did is we built in some privacy controls. So people were kind of worried, what if you have your voice device in a shared space and it starts reading out personal information like your grade or your medical history, whatever it might be. So we built something in. If you're on the mobile phone app, that's cool. You're authenticated. Great. Read the information out. If you're on your voice device, it asks you for a PIN number. And in fact, we use our mobile phone app to be able to set not only your PIN number, but some other preferences to further make the experience more personalized to our users. So something I didn't demonstrate is you can say, hey, AskLU, what's new? And you can control that. So you can say, I'm interested in bus delays and library books, but don't tell me about sport, for example, and they can actually personalize that conversation they're able to have. So just to reiterate, the university has to be sort of comfortable from a GDPR perspective, and you can get some help from AWS with that, but also thinking about how you're actually going to use it and put the students kind of in charge of their data, if you like.
Yeah, that's really useful. Just to add to that, Chris, and just to share it with the audience, something else that we're seeing a lot of universities now doing is with data that is potentially private to students, we're also seeing a lot of institutions now looking into using Alexa voice profiles, which again is a second step authentication. So students still have to authenticate the first time they log into the skill, but then only them using their own voice, of course, can actually access certain topics such as grades, simple things such as grades, for example, which we might not want everyone walking to a smart speaker and asking about those things. Okay, so shifting topics a little bit now. One of the things that you've addressed, which I think is quite an interesting topic because we see a lot of focus within well-being, particularly in UK, but not only. You've talked about well-being and how you've decided to focus quite a lot of the skill capabilities to address that. One of the questions we got is, are you looking into in the future into having some sort of human live support to those capabilities of the skill?
Yeah, we definitely are. One of the things that you can do, and we've not done yet, but we're looking at, is you can augment the kind of voice and chat technology with real human, and you can actually analyze, especially if you've got voice data. So perhaps I'm talking now and I'm nice and relaxed on this webinar, but when I'm talking to the university, I talk faster and my voice gets more high pitched and I get a bit stressed. You can actually detect that, and you can make a decision. So you can say, well, I'm gonna pass over to a real human now, and they can also see the transcript of what's gone on before. So there's some good opportunities there, and actually what we hear from students from the universities, they're interested on how you can use this for welfare. And I think the driver there is students aren't always happy to talk to a person. We'd really like them to ring us up and to come and speak to our services, but actually they really like talking to Alexa, and if we can kind of get the balance right there could be something quite powerful. The other thing is being able to ring up the skill. So I didn't demonstrate that, but we have a phone number. You ring that number, you get straight through to LU and you can talk, and that's another way where we can potentially bring in a human on a phone or a support line. So there's some quite exciting possibilities there, I think.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because that really bridges back and links back to what I was saying in terms of the trends from other institutions, which is these Alexa projects and all these conversational platforms tools that we now have available also give institutions an opportunity to become more approachable. And that's not just about, the services that are directly available there, but also really pointing students to the right direction and making them feel that there's always someone there looking after them and pointing them to the right direction. I know you spent some time thinking about this, and I know there was a time where you were talking about digital friends. Do you want to just give us a glimpse into the future of what that might look like?
Yeah, the idea really, I mean, this is the simple idea. If Alexa can be to you as a friend, a physical human friend would be to you, then that's kind of really what we're aiming at. And if you think about what a student might ask the friends, they might say to them, look, I'm really not doing great today, I'm struggling, I'm not very well. What's your opinion on this? Think of all the questions that we might ask. Now, actually getting to there is quite challenging, because some of those interactions are quite rich. But that's where we want to get to. And for us, that was about giving the chatbot a personality. So, it didn't do it today because it's random, but when I ask, what's the weather like, sometimes it will throw in little things. It'll say like, it's lovely and warm in my server room, but it's quite cold outside in Lancaster. And these little phrases that just give the user an idea that this is a little bit more than a computer talking. It's someone that they can start to maybe even have a relationship with, and they'll feel confident and comfortable to ask more questions. And I think developing that as an idea is really quite exciting. And if you add in some of the machine learning technologies and some of the other things inside the AWS stack, that becomes quite powerful, because a friend, right, might suggest to you, do you know what? I think you should be spending a bit more time in the library. And that's the kind of thing that we'd really see, Alexa and the voice devices being able to do. I'm super excited by that.
All right. Okay, just two more questions, because we are just about to get to our 60 minutes. One practical question and one a bit more inspirational to the end. One practical question we got, we actually got a few of these, so there's a huge interest about this, is are students actually using this? Have you seen, so I think you mentioned you launched these about 13, 14 months ago. What are the trends that you've been seeing in terms of usage? Are there any particular areas of the skill that people are using more than others? What can you share around that?
Well, that's about 10 questions in one. I'll go fast. Yes, students are using it. We launched it through the mobile app because we knew there was a lot of students there. So at first, a lot of the usage, maybe 80%, came through the app by voice, but through the app. We're seeing voice devices, so Alexa devices, actually taking up more of that load, and more about sort of 50-50 split. The usage really depends on the university time of year. When it's exam time, the most popular skill is what's my seat in the exam, etc. It follows a curve. In terms of actual usages, we have been able to build some reporting and some stats on that. but you're talking of thousands of interactions per day. And again, at the very start of the year, when students are familiarizing themselves with where to go, we'll see more usage, and outside term time less usage, but you can build things out for that.
All right, awesome. And now, Chris, for the last minute, I think you've put yourself in a position where you are becoming one of the leaders in this space for voice technology for universities. If I were to ask you, how do you see this technology evolving? Let's say over the next 10 years, how do you think Alexa will look like for universities in 10 years' time?
I think it will be the way that most people interact with our services. It will replace more traditional kind of web portals. It will replace, antiquated workflow processes that require you to do a lot of clicking and talking. I think we're going to need to augment that with technology, with real people. But if we can take away that routine interaction that gets in the way, the things that annoy us in our day-to-day job of booking rooms and asking questions about things, if we can take that away and actually through things like machine learning have that presented to us in a different way, or just have that done really easily, we can spend more time actually doing what matters, which is kind of contacting the students, looking after their well-being, getting alongside them, even teaching them in new and different ways. And I can see that that's where things are heading in the future. And also, this idea that it can really genuinely be a friend that you can talk to, I think that's quite exciting.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Chris, for your time today. It's been very inspiring to hear your thoughts and what you've been up to in terms of Alexa LU. For the people in the audience, thanks again for being with us here today. Again, you will receive the recording from this session. Both myself and Chris are fully available for any follow-up questions you might have. Just feel free to reach out to us. Thank you.
Thank you.